There we go. We're live.
All right. Hello. Welcome, everyone, to our National Geographic Hangout. Today, my name is Sean O'Connor, and I'm here at the National Geographic headquarters in Washington, D.C. And I'm joined by a couple of friends and scientists down in the Bahamas. And we'll get into a deeper introduction, but I would like to just quickly introduce Clare Fieseler, who's a marine ecologist and a National Geographic explorer, and her colleague Kate Press, who is also a field scientist, who is based, her research is currently based out of Eleuthera, the Cape Eleuthera Institute Field Research Station in the Bahamas. So, since we're going to be tuning in with Clare and Kate down in the Bahamas, we actually want to kick off the hang-off with just a brief introduction to the geography of the place. We think it's really important to get a sense of where Clare and Kate are. And so to do that, I'm actually going to share my screen and show you a map, and we can learn a little bit more about where we are at. So give me one moment, and share this. And Clare and Kate, let me know if you're seeing my map so I can know everyone else is too.
Yes.
Great. Awesome. So I'm using the National Geographic MapMaker interactive tool. So this tool is available for anyone to sign on to and explore geography of different places. And today we're actually just going to bring our focus to the Bahamas, which is southeast of the coast of southern Florida and northeast of Cuba. And what we'll do is kind of zoom into the area to get a better sense of it. So we can see actually the Bahamas is made up of an astounding amount of islands and islets and keys. I believe it's something like over 700. Kate and Clare are on a small island here called Eleuthra Island. And actually using this tool, we can kind of flip around to some different versions of maps, and I think this is a really nice one for exploring the geography of the Bahamas, because it shows you, in this, you can see the light coloration of a lot of the water surrounding some of the islands here, and that's a signal for us that these are some kind of shallower water, and in fact, this is a bank that's actually a submerged carbonate platform. So basically, it's an area in the ocean that's been built up over time by deposits of coral and other organisms, and is actually quite shallow relative to some of the surrounding oceans. And so if we zoom in to Eleuthera Island, I actually, Kate was just showing me a little while ago where their field station is, the Eleuthera Institute, and it's down here on the southern end of the island. And really neat because it's actually on the east side of this little peninsula here. And so you can see the light coloration where they have some shallower water ecosystems to conduct their field research. And then just on the other side of the peninsula, it drops off where you have a much deeper ocean where they're able to conduct experiments and research in deeper ocean environments. Another neat thing I just wanted to point out that you can do is actually use this kind of measurement tool here to look at maybe the distance from Florida to Eleuthera Island. And play around with some fun tools like that just to get a better sense of it. So, Clare and Kate, I'm going to just stop sharing my map for now and actually invite you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you're up to down in Eleuthera.
Sure, great. So as Sean was saying, my name's Clare Fieseler, and this is Kate Press. And Kate and I have actually been friends for a while. We met when we were getting our master's at Duke University. In coastal environmental management, and I've gone on to study climate change and coral reefs, and Kate's gone on to study fisheries and how different types of fish are impacted by some of our choices, like increasing fish pressure and offshore wind. And Kate and I have both spent a lot of time in the Caribbean over the past couple of years, but this is my first time to the Bahamas, and she's been my host here for the past couple days, showing me around the Bahamas. It's a really incredible ecosystem. And Kate works some really fascinating animals for her research. So you want to say a little bit about your work, and then we'll just about that?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Kate Press again. I am a PhD student at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, and luckily I get to be down here in the Bahamas where it's nice and warm while it's really cold up there. And I've been here since August doing some of my own research and also teaching high school students here about science and marine life and how to run experiments. So I think the first thing that we're going to do is meet some of my study species. They're juvenile lemon sharks, and we're going to go feed them. Let's
go. Great. So I want to just let everyone viewing know that we actually are open and would love to hear your questions. And the way to get us your questions is actually to tweet us at Explore Inside. And we will kind of get them answered towards the end of our Hangout. So please send any questions you have. And actually, we have the Twitter feed up here, so you can see it's at Explore Inside, and this is the Twitter feed of National Geographic Learning. So tweet at us, and your questions will show up here, and we'll get them answered. I also just want to point out that Kate and Claire also have great Instagram accounts that they use to document a lot of what they're seeing in the field while they're out studying the organisms they study. And Kate is at Kate McPress on Instagram, and Claire is at Clare Fieseler. And we'll actually post those in the Hangout page, and you can follow them along. Oh my gosh, so what do we have here?
So we've got some food here. So Kate, tell us what we feed the sharks.
So we have some sardines that we've cut up, and we are going to go put them in the shark tank.
All right. Can you see them, Sean?
Yes, I can see them. Yeah.
All right. So once Kate throws the fish in, you can see I think the sharks. Yep.
There we go.
There we go.
And what kind of sharks are these?
They're juvenile lemon sharks. They're one of the most common species down here in the Bahamas. They live in the shallow mangrove environments, and we're doing a lot of experiments with them right now. So we've got about 8 sharks in this tank, and we feed them every day.
You can see they were actually, so the sharks, a lot of species need to constantly be moving, and so a lot of people think that sharks always need to be moving to get oxygen across their gills, but these are this is a shark that lives more on the ocean floor, and so they can actually pump water over their gills and sit and wait for predators. So before Kate started throwing fish in this water, they were just sitting quietly on the bottom, and now they're kind of in a frenzy for all the sardines she's throwing in here.
It looks like they start off slowly, but actually move quite fast when they're kind of going in to grab a bite.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's actually one of the things that Kate studies is that turning behavior, that really quick turning behavior, because that's like a cue that they're feeding. They only kind of are engaging that, and so Kate can talk a little bit about that and how she studies that behavior a little bit later.
I think they have just kind of gobbled up all of the food that we put in there, and they're all looking pretty happy. So I think we should move inside where it's easier to hear us.
Okay, great.
Real quickly, Kate, how big are these sharks in here?
So they're all less than a meter in length, and they're probably less than 2 years old. But lemon sharks can get up to 9 feet in length. They're pretty big animals when they're adults.
Yeah. So these are kind of like the teenagers, right? A little bit?
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
The rambunctious teens.
Let's go back in the lab where you can hear us a little bit better.
Okay, great. So knowing a little bit about the Bahamas, that a lot of the coast of the islands and the islet there are covered in mangroves, I'm guessing that the sharks, the juveniles, spend a lot of time in the mangroves because that's where they find a lot of good food to eat. Is that right?
So it's both for food and for protection. So these little sharks want to stay in shallow water because other sharks can actually eat them. So it's safety in the shallow water, and also there is a lot of food. So we call the mangroves a nursery area for small animals.
Yeah, so I was actually Kate was telling me all about how she goes about catching these sharks. And I think we have a photo to bring up here if it's possible. We got like a little red box to show actually where they kind of live. Well, this is, Kate, you want to talk about this?
Sure. So this is one of the lemon sharks that we caught out in the mangrove area. And you can see how shallow the water is, and you can kind of get a sense for how small these animals are. So that's one of our other researchers holding the shark, about to release it back into the water.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Well, I'm curious, how do you catch them?
That's a good question. So I think we've got a photo of where we catch them, and we can bring that up first. So the juvenile lemon sharks here hang out in tidal creek areas, like the one in the picture that's shown in red. And what we do is during high tide, when there's lots of water in the creek, we go out and set a net that blocks off the mouth of the creek. So it's a net that stretches from end to end, and we have people that sit out there all day as the water moves out of the creek system. Sometimes that's up to like 6 hours in a day. They wait until it gets shallow and they start seeing sharks coming towards the net. And when they do start seeing sharks in the shallow water, they send people out to kind of herd them into the net, and then a few people will take one end of the net and encircle the sharks in the water. And once they've got them all penned in the net, they are able to take really big hand nets.
I think we got a photo here too.
We've got a photo of the net and the creek mouth. So that's what it looks like. And then once they're kind of inside that confined area, our researchers will take a larger hand net and scoop up the sharks. We put them in coolers to transport them back to the lab for our work here. And then we take them back by boat in the cooler, and we change the water in the cooler as we come back to our research facility, just so we have good water quality, lots of oxygen in the water, and the temperature doesn't get too warm.
Got it.
But we were talking, Kate and I were talking earlier, and how, it sounds really exciting to be out there, catching sharks, but as she talked about, it's a lot of waiting. It's a lot of just waiting for the tide to come in and out, with just a very short hour of just frenzy trying to catch sharks. And so I think you have have to have a lot of patience for this work, even though it seems really exciting.
It's a lot of patience. We often just sit in the water for hours at a time with mosquitoes flying everywhere. And then we get if there are sharks at all, sometimes we don't see any sharks. If we do see sharks, it's a lot of action for maybe 30 minutes to an hour as we catch the sharks. And I see that there's a question.
Yes. And so the question is, how do you make sure not to hurt the sharks?
That's a really good question. One of the things that we care about here is animal health and safety. And so we make sure that all of the methods that we use are going to have the least amount of negative impacts on the animals. So when they're in the nets and stuff, they're still in the water. We try to keep them in the water as much as possible so that they're still getting water over their gills. We keep them out of the water for very, very short amounts of time, and that's kind of the most important thing to keeping them healthy. And we're not grabbing onto them. We're not using any methods that would really have long-lasting impacts on their health. And another reason that we catch these juvenile lemon sharks is they actually do really well in captivity. And this is a species that's been studied here for more than 10 years, and in other places in the Caribbean and in the Bahamas. So we have a really good history of how to care for the animals.
Got it. Thanks for answering that. And looks like that question, or we have a hello from a 5th grade class at Niles Elementary in Niles, Illinois. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and keep on sending the questions.
Great. All right. Hi, Niles Elementary. Good to have you guys with us. So I actually had a question for Kate. So Kate's actually on the tail end of her research right now. She's been at it for 4 months, and we'll tell you all about that. But what's going to happen to these sharks now that your research is done?
That's a really good question, too. So we keep animals here in the wet lab, but we don't keep them for very long. Once the animals are finished with our experiments, we are able to return them to the same place that we got them. And that's actually really important because past research that has been done here shows that they stay within the creek systems where we find them for a good portion of their juvenile lives. So they're not moving from one creek habitat to another very often. We want to make sure that we're returning them to the same place that we found them.
Got it. Got it. Now, I know we have a video at some point to show.
Yeah, and maybe before we go into the video, we'll just talk a little bit about why. So the video is a video of actually the experiments that Kate is running, but maybe we'll just provide a little bit of context first.
Sure, that'd be great.
So, the reason why Kate is studying sharks is because, we're changing the ocean environment considerably as humans, and one of the big changes that is both good but also has some challenges is that we're studying a lot of places in the world, including mostly Europe, but even the U.S. we're starting to develop it now too, is offshore wind power, because we can generate a lot of power by setting up these huge windmills out in the middle of the ocean. So that's good because it's renewable energy source. So it means that we're not always putting, we're relying on things like gas to, put in our cars or coal for our homes. We can use a renewable source like wind that doesn't have a lot of emissions, which can be bad for the environment. And so offshore wind's a really good thing, but we really don't know much about some of the trickle-down effects of what it means to put a giant windmill in the ocean. And so one of my questions to Kate was, she's really interested in these cables. So if you've got a windmill, like how do you get that energy back to mainland? There are these underwater cables that transport that energy. So I don't even know, what do those cables do, and should they be something that we worry about for the animals that are in the ocean?
Yeah. So there, like Claire said, there are a lot of these potential environmental impacts that we're not really sure how they're going to affect the animals in the ocean. And one thing that we know about sharks is they have this sense that we don't have. They have pores on their heads. I think we actually have a picture of this too. It's the picture of the shark head. But maybe not.
Get that up.
Okay, so what you'll be able to see in the picture is there are lots of little tiny black dots on its face, around its mouth, and those are sensory organs that allow them to detect electric fields, and that's something that we can't do. Yeah, that's the picture. You can kind of see up around the tip of its head, little tiny black dots. So those are called ampullae of Lorenzini. And they allow the shark to detect electric fields. And that's really important for them because it helps them find food. So sharks are kind of like people. They have a lot of the same senses that we do. So when they're trying to find food, they might use their sense of smell. They can use their eyes a little bit, but probably less than we do to find food. And then the really important thing that they do is they use that sense to detect electric fields at close ranges. So when they're near their food item, that's the sense that takes over and tells them where their food is. And all fish and marine organisms produce a bioelectric field in the water. So that helps them zero in on their prey and find a meal.
Which is really interesting because you don't always think about just like a fish you see in the ocean. It's emitting color and maybe sound, but it's also emitting this natural energy field, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
And the sharks hone in on that.
Yep, definitely. And that we've known for a few decades, but we've also realized that some of these power cables that we're putting into the water also create electric fields. The current that runs through them creates a magnetic field in the water, and then the salt water that flows over it can induce an electric field. And it's it's very similar to electric fields that fish produce. So one of our questions is, are the sharks detecting these artificial electric fields in the water, and how might that change their behavior?
Because if you think about it, if they're confusing this electric field with food, then maybe they might change their behavior, try to bite it, or try to swim over it, or maybe they're not trying to find real food as much because they're spending too much time hanging out around the cables thinking that's real food. I think these are some of the questions that are still somewhat unanswered, right?
Yep. We're still we know some stuff about the sensory abilities of sharks and rays, and we're trying to build on that knowledge with some of our experiments here.
Got it. Okay, so that's so interesting. I always think of, electric eels. They're like an organism you learn about in school, but I never thought of other marine organisms as also giving off an electromagnetic field.
Yeah, and all sharks and rays have this ability to detect electric fields. And some other fish species do too, but not all of them.
Got it.
So other species of sharks, even great white sharks. So it's not just these lemon sharks. I mean, that's why it's really interesting is that some of the things that Kate's studying, has, you can kind of, a finding with these lemon sharks could be relevant to great white sharks or other sharks. We're still trying to figure out if that's true, but because all sharks use this electromagnetic field to hunt, it's useful to hone in on one species and see if a finding applies to all the different shark species.
And what we're seeing is they all actually have different ranges that they're sensitive to. But it's a really interesting question to see if there are differences between species and why those differences exist, and also if there are differences within the species among individuals.
Yeah. I think we've got Elder Grove Elementary from Billings, Montana here that we wanted to say hello to, and we've got a question. Do you mind if we take this question before showing the video?
Okay, so the question is, do you test the lemon shark's immunity and for information on medicines that benefit humans? I don't do anything like that with sharks. That's definitely outside of my field of knowledge.
But, I mean, I'm sure lemon sharks, there's a lot of research being done on lemon sharks because they're so easy to work with, right?
Yes, but I don't think anything has medical applications at the moment.
What are some of the other research projects on lemon sharks happening now?
Okay, so there's a lot, even here at our field site. We're looking at lemon shark energetics, how they move, how fast they move, how they might respond to being caught on fishing lines, how that might affect their survival. People are also looking at their social behavior because they are social animals. So there's a lot of work that goes on with juvenile lemon sharks.
Got it. I think it's so neat just in science in general that we take a species like the lemon shark, and there's so much that we don't know about lemon sharks and so much we can learn from them. And so is a lot of science just coming up with questions to learn? I mean, how do you decide what questions to come up with?
So a lot of it is background research. So as scientists, we end up reading a lot of papers that other people have written that are related to things that we're interested in. So I've always been interested in sharks, and I started to get really interested in renewable energy when I started graduate school. So the place where they overlapped was this question about electric and magnetic fields. So I did a lot of background readings, trying to figure out, what hasn't been done and what questions can I ask that haven't been answered before.
Got it.
Sorry, go ahead, Sean.
No, Claire, go ahead. And then I have one other question for Kate, but I want to hear what you have to say.
Oh, I mean, so just going off what Kate was saying, as scientists, that's something we do a lot. I think a question I get is, how do you prepare to go in the field and do an experiment or do a survey? And I just say, there's only a certain level, there's only a certain amount of preparation you can do. And so, I think I was with Kate this summer when she was preparing for her field her field work here, just reading. You basically just spend all your time reading what people have done before, talking to people, trying to get advice. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of trial and error, and last time we did a Google Hangout, Sean and I talked about how there's just a lot of failure in the field, and that's the way you learn how to run your experiments better, is by kind of trial and error. And I know Kate has been hugely successful here for the past 4 months, but I mean,
we made some mistakes too, and we learned what changes we needed to make as we went along.
One of the interesting things she told me that I thought was interesting is that she couldn't get the sharks to respond to her experiment, the cues, and we'll go over this, how do you get a shark to cue its feeding behavior? And they couldn't get it to cue its feeding behavior, and they realized that they needed to not feed the sharks a little bit to make them more hungry, which is something you can't maybe really read about in a paper sometimes.
Well, sometimes you read about it and you get, different species need to be handled differently. So we realized as we were going along that we needed to withhold food from these sharks a little bit longer than we originally thought we had to, which changed our experiment a little bit and made it more successful.
Yeah.
Got it. So I hear that science is a lot about patience. Sometimes it's about trial and error, and it's also about making mistakes and learning from them.
Definitely.
Cool. So I want to learn a little bit more about your background and how you got into science, but before we do that, I want to see if maybe we could just talk about the science that you're up to now with the video a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, great.
So like I was saying before, since these animals have the ability to detect electric fields, and we know that, we wanted to find out what kind of electric fields, the level, kind of the magnitudes that they were able to detect. So we have some information on that based on previous studies that have been done, and we kind of know what kind of electric fields their potential prey produce. So we were able to select a range of currents to put into our tank. And it's a little bit complicated, but basically we're creating an artificial electric field inside of our tanks. And we can change the level of current that's running through our system. So it's changing the size of the electric field that's produced. We just wanted to see what the behavior of the sharks, and we also used rays to see if their behavior changed in the presence of that electric field and how it changed. So were they attracted to it? Were they circling it and biting it or foraging around it, making lots of movement in that area? Or were they repelled by it? Were they moving away, staying out of that end of the tank?
Got it. Okay, yeah, why don't we go ahead and we'll play this video now.
Sure. So this video is showing one of our lemon sharks, and right where it's circling is where the electric field was turned on. So this shark actually turns and bites at the artificial electric field twice in this video. So that's the second time right there. Or maybe this one is. Yeah, right that.
How do we know that the field is there? You just know from your work.
So we have an acrylic piece of plastic down there, and it has tubes that are creating a circuit in the water, and we know exactly where that's placed in the sand.
Okay.
We can show a diagram of it. It might be easier to see. Obviously, this is an aerial video. We can show a little diagram of where Kate's equipment is, but maybe we can show the ray if we can continue playing the end of that video, because there's yellow rays, which are kind of like stingrays that Kate also works with, aside from sharks.
Okay.
If we can get that going.
Yeah.
All right. There we go.
So in this video, the electric field is toward the middle of the tank, kind of right where that piece of white plastic is, in between that plastic and the middle of the tank. So it's moving right around it just about now. And that, what it's doing here is foraging. So we know that it's detecting something in that range.
And it's like flapping. It's, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's responding to it.
Yes. So we were looking at, how often they were responding to that area, and if they displayed any specific behaviors, like turning towards it or turning away from it, or being right on top of it for any given amount of time.
And something that I think is really fascinating about Kate's work is, it infuses kind of like this technology aspect of, electromagnetic currents, but also behavior and physiology. But the behavior is pretty cool because you can study it in a very kind of quantitative way. So Kate uses these very complex and very expensive software to kind of like to code, for there's a code for every time there's a sharp turn or for a flap of the wings, and she can really develop some serious statistical mathematical computations about this behavior, which kind of visually just looks like a behavior, but you can make that into almost math, which is a really cool part about it, and really generate predictions of how this might play out in the ocean.
Yep, and we're able to, using that, we're able to make comparisons. So at the different levels of electric fields that we test, we're able to see if they were significantly different from moving around without an electrical field in the water.
Cool. And I see we have the diagram up here too, if we want to take a peek at that.
Yep. So this just shows kind of what's under the sand in that video. And we have two parts of the experimental setup, one that's inactive and one that's active that gets turned on during the trials.
So one's emitting energy and one's not?
Yeah. Okay. And we just wanted to make sure that nothing else in the tank was attracting the animals for any other reason. So it wasn't just the structure in the water, that it was actually the electric field.
Yeah. And so real quickly, when I first saw this diagram and I was learning about Kate's research, so there's this yellow line in the diagram that says olfactory source, and that's where Kate emits like a scent, basically, a scent to tell the shark, like, oh, hey, there should be food around here because I'm activating your nose, like the other sense that you have. But I didn't know how she did that. So can you go back to our faces for a second and take away the diagram? No?
Yeah, we can do that. And so olfactory, just to make sure everyone understands, is just, I mean, we have our olfactory system, and that's what we use to smell.
To smell, yeah. Right. And so when I asked Kate, okay, so what's an olfactory cue? Like, how do you make the shark smell, like, pretend like there's food around?
Yeah, so this is maybe one of the less fun aspects of my job. I have to squish up. Yeah, I have to squish up fish. I take a bucket and I put a little bit of salt water in it, and then I take some of those sardines that we feed the sharks and I kind of mush them up so we get like a fish juice out of it. And then I take a syringe and I suck up some of the juice and I insert it into a tube that runs into the tank. It runs down to the bottom of the tank and comes up through the sand. And then you just see a plume of fish juice coming out of the water, and you can kind of just see it moving around the tank. And then you see the shark really, like, as soon as it smells that, you see a change in its behavior, and it'll start moving around the olfactory cue where it's emitted. And so that's how we know that the shark is hungry and will forage and is looking for food, and that we can start our experiment.
Wow, what a neat method you devised to inject the stinky fish juice into the tank.
Yeah, well, this is where it comes in handy to read lots of literature beforehand, because other people have done the same thing. And
other people have used the stinky fish juice.
Yep.
Cool. So a little question on background. I actually want to hear about how you both got into science. And then, Kate, I was also struck by the fact that you spent some of your career working at the New England Aquarium, which is an aquarium in Boston, Massachusetts, that I grew up spending time going to, where I was first introduced to a lot of marine life. And yeah, I was curious from both of you what first interested you in science, and maybe, Kate, also what your experience working in an aquarium was like, or researching at an aquarium.
Yeah, sure. So what should I do first? So I worked at the aquarium for about 3 years, and I was part of a group called the Consortium for Wildlife Bycatch Reduction, and that's a really big, complicated title, but we worked with fishermen and scientists who were out in the field trying to help them find ways to prevent bycatch from happening. And bycatch is when a fisherman goes out, a recreational fisherman or a commercial fisherman, they go out and they want to catch something like tuna. And that's their main thing that they want to catch. But they might also catch a lot of other things, like other fish. They might catch sea turtles, they might catch sharks, and they don't want to catch those other things. So we were trying to help scientists and fishermen develop ways to prevent those things from happening.
Cool. And we have a question from the audience, and I think I'll ask you now because it might actually help, and then feel free to add your answer about how you first got into science.
Okay.
Your question, this is another question. It comes from Niles Elementary School in Illinois, and they have an ecosystem in their classroom, and it sounds like they have mosquitoes and some kinds of fish and snails in it right now. And so they were kind of just wondering, did either of you study animals when you were in elementary school?
I know that elementary school, I don't think so, but when I got into high school, I was really lucky that there was a marine biology class that I took, and we went and collected a bunch of fish and snails and crabs from our local environment, the Jersey Shore, like the beaches of New Jersey, and we brought them into the classroom, and we studied their behavior, and we took care of them and put them in the aquariums. And that for me was when I really got interested, because it was really hands-on, and I realized that I didn't do well just like with chemistry because of chemical equations. I wasn't really good at that, but I got really excited and motivated by the hands-on experience of working with crabs and fish. And for me, that was really a motivator to choose kind of this career. But that happened a little bit later for me. I think I was about 16 at that time. But I did spend a lot of time playing at the beaches when I was a kid. We lived very close to the Jersey Shore, just playing with crabs and seagulls or whatever it may be. And that for me was kind of how I got my curiosity started about the ocean.
Yeah, thinking about it, I didn't actually get to work with any animals until after I finished college. I was always interested in environmental conservation. When I was a kid, I was more interested in being outdoors and learning about recycling. I was really active in the Girl Scouts, so I got a lot of experience, a lot of outdoor experiences through that organization. But it wasn't until after I finished with college that I got to work with animals, and just had a lot of questions about them, and knew that I wanted to focus on marine animals and marine science.
Got it.
And Kate's worked with sea turtles before, and
sea turtles and reef fish, and some like Claire, some coral. Yeah.
Now for Niles Elementary, so it sounds like they have a really neat ecosystem in their classroom and their aquarium. What would you recommend to the students at Niles Elementary? Can they be sort of studying animals and animal behavior at their age?
Oh, definitely. I think what we kind of do here is the kind of observational questions that kids might ask anyway, and what is the animal doing? Why do we think it's doing that? What is it interacting with? I don't know what else.
Well, I think also a lot of new questions are happening. We're interacting, we as humans are, interacting with our environment in new ways all the time because of just technology or because there's more people on the planet. And so I think there's just a lot of unanswered questions out there. And I'm sure the ecosystems classroom can ask questions of, what's the impact of having all this pavement in the backyard of the school system? Is that impacting, how much water there is, and is that impacting the bugs that live there? I think the more we change our environment as humans, the more questions there are to ask. And I know even here at the Institute, there's more questions being asked about fisheries and how that's impacting the local ecosystem, because there's a really high demand for lobster and conch, which are two fish or marine critters that are in high demand down here. And so, like I said, the more we change our environment, the more pressure we put on the environment, the more we all kind of, whether we're in middle school or elementary school, the more we owe it to ask those questions and pursue them.
Yeah, but even with in a tank and watching fish and other animals, you kind of will see changes. Like if you are trying to give them a better habitat, you might try different things to see, do they like these rocks better, or do they like shells better? Do they like sandy areas better? What do they have a preference for? And, that's kind of similar to questions that we ask here.
Yeah, great. And so it's again, it comes back to curiosity and just asking questions about the way that things interact in the world.
Yeah.
I love that. How about any teachers or scientists that inspired you along the way or inspire you now?
That's a good question, too. I had really great teachers growing up, and I was part of a group called Science Olympiad when I was in middle school.
I didn't even know this. great.
So besides just being able to have a lot of outdoor experiences, which I think influenced the kind of career path that I wanted to take, having teachers that ran those kind of organizations for us got me interested in science along the way. And then there are so many amazing scientists and marine conservationists right now that either inspire us by the science that they're doing or their writings, getting other people interested in marine conservation through books and sharing their experiences outside. Also artists and photographers, I think, have always been a really big influence on me. I love the way that they are able to use photography to talk about, pristine environments, that kind of, a really nice shot of a beach that everyone wants to go to, and then a shot of a beach that has, lots of marine plastic on it. It kind of tells a story about our world and the things that we need to be doing. So across the board, I think lots of people are doing great things for marine science and conservation.
Yeah. I'd agree with Kate on all those things. The one thing I would add is that, I wasn't always sure that even though I had a long interest in science, like Kate, I was really interested in journalism and photography. And I started my relationship with National Geographic when I actually worked for National Geographic in filmmaking. And I worked there for 2 years, and one of the projects I worked on was to create it was called a Lifetime Achievement Reel, to make a very short documentary about a woman named Sylvia Earle, who's probably one of the best known female oceanographers of our time. And I got to interview her and interact with her, and she was just really inspiring, and she inspired me to go back into science, to kind of pursue, my dream at the time, even though I was really hesitant. Maybe I was lacking some confidence, I'm not sure. But yeah, Sylvia Earle, she's a National Geographic Explorer in residence, and she really inspired me to get back into science. And as a woman, too, we really need more women in the field, I think. The scientists of our generation, I think it's about 50-50, but that's a new thing. I'd say I never had a female advisor. All my advisors have been men, and so we want to keep that going. We're having a balance of men and women in marine sciences. I think it just brings a balanced perspective. So yeah, I encourage all young girls and boys, if they want to pursue it, to pursue it. And I want to also say that I was not the best at science in high school. No, I think it takes a lot of different characteristics than just an A+ average in science to be a good scientist.
Yeah, I really didn't get into science until after, late in college a little bit. I majored in geology, which is studying rocks. And so I started kind of in marine science later in life, but it's because I'm a little bit stubborn and I'm really interested in the subject that I've kept pursuing it.
I like that students who might be good in math, or a student who might be a really wonderful artist or interested in photography, they all have a role that they can play in science.
Absolutely.
Cool. So, and speaking of science, I do have one science-related question here that comes from one of our viewers, and I just wanted to see if we could sneak it in and see what you guys say. And the question is about why sharks can smell underwater, and this person can't. They're wondering why they can't smell underwater. So
that's a good question. And it has to do with where we live and where sharks live. So we don't live in water. We only go in the water recreationally. Sometimes for our jobs we have to get into the water. But we really don't need to smell underwater. We need to smell outside. And sharks, they have evolved their entire lives in the water, and they need to be able to use those senses to interact with their environment. So that's why they can smell underwater. Also, I can't see underwater very well, but other animals who are adapted to living underwater are better at that than I am.
Got it. It's just a different environment. And how about any endangered species? Are you studying, and this question comes from Thomas Jefferson Middle School, are there endangered species that you study from our oceans?
So the two species that we're studying here, the lemon sharks and the yellow rays, neither of those species are endangered. But about 1/4 of the sharks and rays in our world, they're actually threatened. They're under it's called the IUCN Red List, and they evaluate all different types of animals and decide if they're threatened or not. So lots and lots of shark and ray species are threatened. But one reason that we use lemon sharks and yellow rays here is it's harder to work with endangered species.
Logistically.
Yeah, logistically, we don't want to put any more pressure on those species than we have to.
Right.
Got it.
And so I work with corals, and coral reefs corals are very abundant, but just recently there have been a number of species that have been added to the endangered species list under the United States Environmental Protection, or the Endangered Species Protection.
And these are different species of coral, Claire?
Yeah, different species of coral. And like Kate said, so the good part about that is that we're recognizing as the country of the United States and the world that there increasingly are more species that maybe we didn't know about before that are endangered. We just didn't know how endangered they are, and we need to put them on this list and protect them. But then one of the tough things that happens is that a lot of times we don't know enough about these species to protect them, even though they're endangered, because then they become hard to study because you can't bring them into the lab. You can't, you don't want to, like Kate said, put additional pressure. So there's this really tough balance between an endangered species and protecting them, but then not knowing enough about them to protect them because scientists can't always study them once they're endangered. So it's a really interesting question.
Yeah, great. Well, with you guys being down at Eleuthera Island in the Bahamas, we know that it's a field research station, so we know a lot of scientists go there to conduct experiments. And I was wondering what life is like at a field research station. What is life like on Eleuthera Island in the Bahamas? It's a place I have never been.
Life here is pretty good. I think Claire has been really impressed with the field station here and the community here. We're really lucky that we have a lot of scientists and researchers that live here full time, and we have a lot of people who visit, like me, for semesters or for even a couple of weeks at a time and do their work here. So we get to interact with a lot of other scientists and researchers, and we all help each other out. So none of the field work I do on my own. I have a whole group of people here that support me in my research. And also we have interns here that help me with my day-to-day stuff, keeping tanks clean, feeding the fish a lot of the time. So that's really important that we have a community of people here that are able to help each other out. And we actually also are working with educational programs that are here all the time. So schools come and visit our research station and learn about marine science and all the other stuff that we do here. We have a lot of sustainability activities on this campus, so renewable energies. There's an aquaponics facility, so we grow some of our own food and fish here. And then we also have the Island School, which is a semester program for high school students. So they're here, taking classes, living down here full time. It's about 50 students, and then I was teaching some of them about marine research for their semester. So we have a really nice big community here with lots of great facilities and good people. So it's a pleasure to work down here.
But I will say they have an extremely impressive campus out here, but there are some things that are just inherent to field work, especially being on these remote islands. Kate and I have both spent quite a bit of time on remote islands in the Caribbean over the past couple of years for our research. Just things that like you can't really go to the grocery store and buy what you want, or you need, like, if you need special equipment, you need it flown in, especially you have to wait months to get it.
Yeah, we can't mail anything down here if we want to get it quickly.
Yeah, you can't always cook your own food sometimes. You have to eat at 7 a.m., 12 noon, and 7 p.m.
So people make us food. We get meals here, but we do have to eat at specific times. And that means that sometimes if I'm running an experiment over mealtime, I've got to skip that meal or have someone bring me some food.
Yeah. And just, there's mosquitoes out here. It's hot.
No air conditioning.
Air conditioning. Something I always tell, and you're hauling a lot of gear, at least I do. Something people always think it's very glamorous, and there can be things that are really great about being at a field station because obviously you can tell Kate and I like what we do. But I think you have to be athletic to be out here. You need to be able to really rough it and just be open to the experience of things aren't always going to be comfortable, but that can be exciting too. It's kind of a trade-off.
Yeah.
So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. So we have a couple other questions from our viewers.
Yeah.
And we have a question from Patterson Elementary School. And they were wondering on Eleuthera if there are any water pollution issues that that are faced by the organisms living there.
That's an excellent question, and it's actually something that some of our researchers are tackling right now. We're lucky here in Eleuthera that the island is actually not really overdeveloped, and there are extensive mangrove areas. And if you know, if you've learned anything about mangroves, you know that they're really important for mitigating, preventing that kind of water pollution. So when it rains and there are lots of hard pavement surfaces around, that water will just run off and pick up chemicals and garbage, and that will flow right into the ocean. And that's a huge problem. That kind of water pollution is really detrimental to the fish that live right by the coast. And
fish that like the sharks eat, right?
Yeah, well, and like the lemon sharks, that habitat we want to keep really clean. So people down here are doing experiments to see if the pH of water changes, how that would impact fish species. And we're also looking at how water temperature, when water temperature increases, if that is, how that might affect the survival of different types of fish.
Got it.
And one last thing I should mention, it's really impressive for me being on this island, is that this island is pretty remote, and compared to a lot of other islands in the Caribbean, there's not that much development. Like, there's not as much pavement as you might think. And Kate was talking about the mangroves, and they're basically like these big, forests with their roots in the water, and they act somewhat like a filter sometimes, so they can clean the water. So if you have enough mangroves as kind of like a buffer, as like this clean area between the roads and stuff, then that's a really, really good thing. And so, well, I'm not sure people here are studying here. It's something that a lot of researchers have been thinking about and studying more throughout the Caribbean, is like how, do these big stretches of mangrove forest actually help mitigate all the pollution that we cause as humans.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I know that all across the United States we have countless rivers and streams and creeks, and planting trees and forests along some of those environments as well. It's the same thing. They can be there to help protect the water and all the organisms that live in it from some of the harmful effects of our roadways and our other development.
Yeah. Good point.
And are we able to look around the facility at all anymore? I don't know if we can do it, but I thought I would just ask. It was so neat to see that the shark tanks were like right next to you. I had no idea that you were so close to such a cool experimenting environment.
What we're going to try to do, we think we might, but one of the things about living on this island is that internet is not everywhere. So let's try to see where we can go. I mean, one of the cool things is seeing more of the tank areas, and also where they're growing food is right out here. So Sean, we'll walk real slow, and if at any point you see us maybe losing connectivity, just let us know, okay?
Perfect.
So this is the lab area where they do some surgery work, or?
No, so this is where we keep all of our equipment.
Oh, equipment.
Yep.
And then you kind of and then the tanks are right outside here.
So we have a lot of tanks here, and we keep different types of fish. We have the lemon sharks that you saw, and we have someone actually doing experiments right now. We can show them the lionfish.
Sure.
We also have invasive lionfish here right now. So they're types of fish that are commonly found now on Caribbean reefs, and they're doing experiments with these fish too.
Oh, wow. And do those, you said they're invasive, does that mean they come from maybe somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, or? Yeah.
So these guys are originally from the Pacific, and they've become really problematic in the Caribbean and other parts of the Atlantic Ocean because they have no native predators, and they eat a lot of food. And they kind of outcompete the other reef fish where they are. So we're doing a lot of experiments looking at how they're changing the environment here.
Cool. Do you think we can get the rays, or no? Can we too far off?
I think we could probably make our way down there.
Okay.
Okay, we'll go look at some more rays.
All right, so you can see they've got a lot of tanks here, and one thing I don't know if you can see.
As we move down here, Claire, I think
maybe in the tank, they've got they're growing.
I think we are losing our connection just a little bit down where we are now.
Okay. All right, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can.
I wonder if that's the limit of our ability to tour the facilities without losing connectivity.
It might be, and that's no problem. I think we actually have more questions from our audience.
Sure.
So I know we had a question about lemon sharks and about some of the work that Kate does with them. And this question actually comes from Elder Grove Elementary School in Billings, Montana. And the question is, do you test lemon shark? Oh, did we already cover this one on medicines? I think we did. I'm so sorry. Yeah, so you don't do any of that kind of testing there.
Oh, I think there's a question here about sharks and how long they live.
Oh, okay. So there are, almost 500 different species of sharks. And they range from sharks that are, this big to the whale sharks that are really, really large. And all
like the size of a school bus.
Yeah. And all sharks have different lifespans. So we know that, some of them live 25 years, and some of them can live up to like 75 years.
And do we know for the lemon sharks how long it is?
I don't think we do know for lemon sharks, but it's really hard to tell because unless they're kept in captivity their whole life, it's hard to pinpoint an age with them.
Ah, got it. And I know sharks sometimes have a bad reputation as organisms that are a bother to humans and sometimes might, attack or harm humans that swim in the waters. But I've kind of learned over time that that's not necessarily true, and was wondering if we might hear your take on that.
Sure. So, you definitely have to be careful when you work with sharks and rays because they have a barb that can sting you. So we learn proper handling techniques to work with these animals, but they're not going to go out and attack us on purpose. We get into those tanks that you saw with the sharks that are in them, and we're able to get in there and clean the tanks with the sharks around us, and they're not really bothered by us in the tank, and they're not going to bite us because we're in there. So it's something that we are concerned about and we keep in mind when we're handling them, but it's not something sharks are out to bite us or to attack us at all.
Ah, got it. Thanks. And we did have a question from Jefferson. If you've ever had any kind of accident when you're working with the animals?
No, I have not had an accident.
Oh, that's great. Well, I know we're
like you slip on the boat or stub your toe, then actually get
I've done that a lot of times.
Okay, so you've had accidents, but not with the animals themselves.
Yeah. I think that's much more likely. And there's this sign back here. There's some great artwork here around the lab, and it says something, true or false. There are more injuries from sharks than there are from toilets, and that is that's false. I think it's there are more. What is it, Kate?
Toilets have injured 43,687 people, and sharks, it was 13 injuries.
Yeah, so 13 injuries from sharks in a year and 40,000 injuries from toilets in a year. So that just gives you a sense of what you should be scared of. I think sharks get a bad reputation, and Kate, they're really, really great here. Just seeing their facilities and their safety practices, that there's really very little harm here to working with sharks. So.
Wow, thanks for just clearing that up for us. And I know we're just about at the end of our Hangout, so I wanted to thank you both, of course, for being with us here today from Eleuthera Island, and also see if you had any final comments for us or anything else you want to let us know.
Well, I just want to thank you guys for coming down here and talking to me. It's exciting to be able to share the work that we do down here with everyone. And
I also want to say a shout out to I think Kate and I are both scientists that we really think it's important to share what we do. Like Kate said, it's exciting. And we both make an effort to do that through social media. You can follow us on Instagram. We're usually active on Twitter. We've both been in the field a lot, so we haven't been able to be on Twitter as much. But and also to reach out if you have questions about the research or about pursuing science. I've fielded a couple questions from classrooms just about my own path, and so I want to say that like scientists are approachable. I hope we look friendly enough. Follow us, contact us. We more than anything just want to share what we do.
Yep.
So yeah, and I want to thank National Geographic Learning for taking the time to connect with us. I know it's always a bit of a hassle to make these remote connections work, but it's been really fun for us. So thank you.
This has been amazing. Thank you both, and we'll post your social media details on the Hangout page on Twitter and Instagram, so people can ask those questions and stay in touch.
Cool. All right.
Okay. Have a great day on Eleuthera Island.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Take care.